beautiful people. This is a short introduction to the readings for week 10. I made a hour-long introduction to what is turning out to be a gigantic week of stuff, but since it is the last week, I wanted to give you all a lot of material to mull over just in case you wanted, after the course is over. I felt like I couldn't get it all in, so I'm still going to do a sort of final lecture, so that'll be the last thing I'll send you on this mailing list. If you'd like to join a mailing list, basically, where I'll send out bi-weekly or monthly newsletter, basically, of further permaculture information and knowledge and new stuff I'm finding and what have you, let me know and I'll include your email on the list. I won't just assume that you want to do that and keep sending you crap indefinitely. You did sign up for a 10-week course. I know it's gone a little bit over. Anyways, appreciate your time, so let me make this quick. This week we are focusing on some very powerful global thinkers and then some specific ecosystem, historical ecosystems that have been managed intelligently by humans to create lots of food and abundance for them, and lots of food and abundance for nature, and have been sustainable and, more than that, even regenerative and healthy for bringing more life to an area. So the two systems we're going to focus on are the Ahupua'a of Hawaii and the Dehesa of southern Spain. The two, I'd say, main thinkers we're going to focus on in terms of the global perspective are Leah Penniman and, again, Vandana Shiva. She is so good, I can't not stop sending you her videos. I can not, anyways, you know what I'm saying. So the first thing I'd recommend, if you only have an hour to watch anything, or even less than an hour, it's 50 minutes, watch the Leah Penniman Keynote Address. She is the steward and manager at Soulfire Farms, along with her family, and they have created, so these two global thinkers that we're going to talk about have really taken a look at the challenges we face and have done something not only to analyze those challenges and give us a clearer sense of what we're dealing with, but also to take positive action in the direction of building farms that feed people, building schools and institutions that educate people and that allow space for activism, for gathering, for human exchange and love and all that. So Vandana Shiva and Leah Penniman have huge admiration for y'all's work and really appreciate y'all being a part of this class. If you ever are to hear this, Leah Penniman's talk is a version of a talk that I've seen her do a couple other times, so there are versions of that talk out there. I believe, although correct me if I'm wrong in this, it's sort of based on her book Farming While Black. I haven't got that yet. I'd like to. I haven't picked up any of Vandana Shiva's books yet. I'd like to do that as well. So I'll let you know, if you join the newsletter, what I'm learning and what updates, I have from those and more. But it's not really summarizable stuff, but I'll just put it that way, that she's looked at the challenges we're facing. I'll use one example of tracing the lineage of our contemporary food system and its current, immigrant labor force that's kind of bolstering it and keeping us all fed and afloat, back through, Jim Crow, sort of sharecropping, slavery, and one of the articles you'll have access to as well traces this all the way back to the Roman latifundia sort of system. As you know, the Romans colonized most of Europe, and as you know, the Europeans colonized most of the world. So I think tracing that lineage is interesting and important. She doesn't go quite back that far, although she does. Some of the things she says could imply that. But she looks at how our contemporary reality, even though not explicitly using slavery, uses prison labor, uses immigrant labor from displaced peoples that have been through, forced sort of NAFTA agreements, trade agreements, through wars, through climate chaos caused by Western industrialized nations, petroleum habit. And she looks at how these people essentially are choosing, quote unquote, to leave their land, leave the people they love, and to come up here and do the jobs that we don't want to do. So there's something very peculiar about that, and her analysis of that, I think, is very noteworthy. And then she doesn't talk as much as I would like in this particular talk, so I would encourage you to also watch, maybe we'll just call it an hour, and watch a short piece on her farm and what they're doing, because her response to this has been far from despair, far from irresponsible sort of, nihilism or something like that, has been to act, and to act hugely and abundantly and for life, for nature. And so much respect to Leah Penniman for doing that. I hope you get inspired like I did by watching her stuff. If you have time for another half hour or so, the Vandana Shiva talk at the recent Dr. Elaine Ingham Soil Food Web, I don't know, School of Soil Food Web, whatever it's called, conference is an amazing and I'd say very up-to-date version. We've been watching some talks from Vandana from further back. This is very recent talk, and globally, again, her perspective is, to me, spot on. She also is someone who's doing something. She has a whole school and farm, a school farm, so to speak, where she is also growing food and educating people. So follow both of those thinkers, pay attention to them. The Ahupua'a system is, if you recall, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but just to review, the native Hawaiian, or one of the native Hawaiian systems of land stewardship that was introduced, as I understand it, by King Kamehameha the Great in mid-19th century. But from what I understand, it was an older practice than that, that essentially marks out political belonging according to ecological belonging. So the watershed that you're in is all one unit. So wherever the water falls and flows, whatever happens at the top of that watershed affects what happens at the bottom. So they understood that and acknowledged that. And there are a few great videos in there, including a couple which are not on the playlist. I'd highly recommend you check out. If you only have time for one, maybe check out the Clifford, the one by Clifford. I'm not even going to try to say his last name. And or the two, I watch them both if you can, because they're very short. The ones that aren't on the playlist are by Kuika Winter, I believe. None of those actually might be on the playlist, so click through if you can to those. Highly recommend those. He goes into an analysis of how permaculture zones, which we haven't really talked about fully in this class, but basically keep the stuff that you use every day close to you, and then the stuff that you don't use too often, or the stuff that you don't need too often, keep it further away. In doing so, you can leave space for nature to do its thing, and you can make your life easier and make your gardening make a lot more sense. And the Ahupua'a, from what I've seen, has a very intelligent way of doing that. So there's more details in there. One of the particular things that I loved was, say, your taro fields right above the housing areas and kind of the lowlands, on a sort of trellised or paddied slope, have water flowing through them, which gets all this agricultural runoff and extra minerals and silt and organic matter and stuff, and from all the life that the agriculture is going to create. If you just dump that straight onto the ocean, it would lead to potentially algae blooms. It would potentially just harm the coral and the fish life and the all the sea life out there. So what they would do is they would run that mucky water, so to speak, into a fish pond, which was a little bit above sea level and blocked off maybe by coral or whatever that they could release or not as they wished. And they would grow herbivorous fish who would eat the algal blooms which would arise from the highly nutrified water, thus cleaning the water and letting it then run out to sea after it's been cleaned, or as it's being cleaned by these fish, which are then another food source for them. So what could have been a problem, algal blooms, is now a solution, is a production for more, freshwater or estuarial sort of fish. So anyways, a lot more in there, a lot of details on the zones and what they call them and how they worked. And I think one of the main takeaways from Clifford's talk for me was that by treating the ecology and the surrounding nature and one's environment as sacred and a realm of the gods and an expression of the gods and even homes of the gods and the gods itself, a massively superior ecological balance was achieved to those situations a la our culture and in Western enlightened science, where nature is seen as a dead matter to be manipulated and or mechanized, made into simply a servant. And we don't have that. We are serving nature. Nature is, in a way, the Lord and Master of our existence in certain regards, or the gods behind nature, the forces that created this beautiful, lush abundance that we can all enjoy in any climate, because there's a form of abundance for every climate that nature has provided. And if humans work with that, it can be Edenic. So the Ahupua'a is a beautiful version of that. I've included some other stuff on sort of comparative just to take a look at what would happen in a monsoonal floodland where you only get rain for a certain, you get giant downpours a certain part of the year, and then you don't have any rain, right? Which is different than a lot of the Hawaiian Ahupua'a areas would be dealing with, and they have a slightly different watershed management system that involves large ponds and trapping the water more for agricultural use. So anyways, you can see that this is not it's not a universal system that applies everywhere, but the background of respect for nature, of using zones intelligently, of keeping, say, the tops of watersheds in forest and not disturbing those, so you don't have erosion and runoff and destruction of the streams and all that stuff. Anyways, I think all those principles, some specific, some more general and vague in terms of human values and human interactions with the land, all of those stand in whatever climate you're in. So lastly, to wrap it up, there are a couple notes in there, a couple starred. So I basically starred all the stuff that I think, if you only have maybe 2 hours or so to watch stuff, check out that stuff. I'll put like triple stars next to the stuff that if you only have an hour, maybe double stars next to the stuff if you only have an hour and a half, and then 1 star next to the stuff if you have like a full 2 hours or a little bit more. And then there's plenty more in there for you to go through. But one of those talks that I'll star is, I think it's Dan Harris Pascal on forest. I forget what the title of the talk is exactly, forest gardens or forest something. He brought my attention to the Dehesa system of southern Spain, which I knew nothing about, which is in southern Spain and a little bit of southern Portugal, and is essentially a managed oak savanna that has lasted for 4,000 plus years, that feeds tons of livestock, tons of people, has all this varied produce as its result, and has stayed abundant and stable throughout the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, plagues, wars. Many civilizations have come and gone, and this system, this human-managed system, has managed to sort of outlast all of that. So in a way, it's a beautiful definition of sustainability, just like the Hawaiian pre-colonization lifestyle was. And I think taking a deeper look at both of these is really important. In that section, you'll find an article by, I think it's Max Paschal, who runs a farm, I believe somewhere back east in Pennsylvania or something. Amazing article. I loved it so much. Again, just like the one on California native sort of horticulture and gardening and managed food forest stewardry, actually managed oak savannas that we have out here. Another reason I love the Dehesa system is because of the climatological similarities we have as a Mediterranean climate. We can basically do that here, or something very similar, adapted to local California conditions. But what was I saying? Max Paschal, The Lost Forest Gardens of Europe, I believe is the title of the article. I read it for you. It's about a half hour, so maybe that'd take you to 2.5 hours, but highly worth it. Really worth looking at the article and actually reading it, because it has great pictures and it has different sort of slideshows that'll run you through educational stuff on how they trellis grapevines between trees and all this awesome stuff. And he doesn't just talk about the Dehesa, he also talks about the Tuscany, the Tuscan Cultura Promiscua, I think it's called, and I believe a couple other things. But anyways, great article. So that's about it. There's a couple other gems in there for you to explore. One that I thought was interesting and educational, in terms of both being rad and what we need for the future, and being, okay, here I'm seeing some of the problematic stuff with Westerners sort of treating Western science, treating nature as just dead matter, to be sort of mechanized in a tool sort of fashion, which can be done beautifully and brilliantly, but also can be sort of dangerous as a concept. And just sort of these notions of discovering something new when you're really recycling older technology, indigenous technology, and not acknowledging that. Some of those problems vaguely came up in the John Todd talk, which is in there, which is also still a great talk, still super inspiring. I'd still highly recommend watching it. I'd actually recommend it watching it more, because it has those little moments where he's like, I'm picking on him a little bit, but it's because I just watched the Leah Penniman talks, and I really was taken by some of her critiques as well as Vandana Shiva's, and have been processing how is permaculture potentially one, just to if we saw the Hawaiian zones, they had a zone system. Permaculture did not invent that concept. It used, or it rediscovered an indigenous technology. When Western science and Western academia don't acknowledge that indigenous origin, I think some dangerous things happen. So there's a talk in there where you see a Western trained academic co-speaking with an Aboriginal Australian about how they work together to manage and to some conservation land, essentially on Aboriginal territory. Instead of the Western scientists going over and dictating what these brown people should do with their land and telling them what's best, and telling their country to get a loan from the World Bank so they can pay that company, and then the taxpayers from that that country have to pay back the World Bank at high interest, and the white-led Western company walks away with lots of money to create this green saviorism thing, white green saviorism or whatever. All of that is something to be questioning, to be thinking about as we study this permaculture stuff. A lot of the videos you'll have noticed are from the white landowning class. And as Leah Penniman points out, that is no accident that is the case. And I don't believe it's just a question of Europeans are superior in there because they had to deal with cold climates and plan. They've become better managers of blah, blah, blah. It has to do with the legacy of colonialism, of land theft, of genocide, of slavery, of continuation of slavery born practices after slavery up until now, when you have prison laborers now working for Walmart at 24 cents on the dollar. People who are in there for non-violent crimes and total, anyways, I could go on. Leah Penniman's talk gets into a lot of that, so I highly recommend checking it out. And I recommend, if you get, all the way down to the end, the Ray Achuleta, I think it is, talk, where he talks really, and this reminder is crucial, to think about soil as a living organism, to think about it as a biological, not just a geological phenomenon. I want to remind us of that as we go forward, that our surroundings are not dead. The earth, the stuff from which our life comes, is a living being made up of billions and billions and billions of just insane numbers of more than stars in the sky, that we can count at least. There are bacteria in little small chunks of soil under our feet. So they're really what's keeping us alive, in a sense. And Ray's talk, I think, is a beautiful version of that. I think he mentioned something about biomimicry in there, which I think is a crucial concept as we move towards a solar punk future where our advanced technology continues to advance, and yet respects and starts to resemble the incredibly intelligent design of nature, right? Which, whether you believe, quote unquote, in evolution or not, whatever that means, I think both of those narratives can totally coexist. The intelligent designs and the evolution creates a very intelligent design, even if you're just scientifically minded. That 4 billion years of practice has made a very beautifully designed, sustainable thing, and even regenerative entity that can continue as be like these bacteria are 4 billion years old, the fungi 3 something. So anyways, that's a crucial thing to remember, and I think it helps give us more respect for nature and helps us design better technology such that we're gonna have a solar punk future. Let's go. And I think while we're doing that, as a lot of these people remind us, we need to be listening to the marginalized voices, not just of nature, not just of the organisms we trod on and are sort of unconsciously aware of, but are fed by the immigrant laborers who we trod on, in a sense, economically and politically, while going to the market to buy the produce that they picked, and not making the connection, while going to the restaurant and eating the food that they prepared and not making the connection. The same goes for our rivers, just treating them as sort of threats to be channelized into giant concrete things or whatever. I could go on. Any concept of nature that reduces to the mechanistic is really potentially dangerous. And so anyway, so y'all can watch the longer talk if you want to hear me go on. It's about an hour to rant about this stuff in a little bit more detail in the middle of the night. So it's middle of the night vibes. So probably different than this AM hustle and bustle I got going today. Yeah, enjoy those readings. I'll be back with a final lecture for y'all, and then hit me up if you want to join the mailing list. I would love to keep people informed about what I'm learning about permaculture, about where my travels are taking me, and what sort of cool plants and people I'm meeting, etc. So I'll send out bi-weekly or monthly newsletter, and Either way, thank you so much for being in this class. Would love to know what you thought of it. Would love to know, any feedback that you have so far. Would love to hear it. Appreciate y'all. Stay cool. Peace.